Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and it's Clash season, baby! Elestrals Clash, more like Elestrals Crash! So if you're unfamiliar, Elestrals put up a Kickstarter a couple of months ago in which they claimed to be developing the next-gen client of their video game, Elestrals Clash. It was being done by the Pixelborn devs and was already in progress, and they were hoping to release the alpha on December 1st. As a YouTube multi-billionaire, I was of course able to afford access to the alpha, and they pushed it back a couple of days, but it's still released really close to their set deadline, which I did not expect to happen. They were like, yeah, we're gonna make a game in a month. So everyone waited with bated breath for the release of the product, which I was finally able to sit down and dedicate at least an hour to last night, and, well, so today we're going to be talking about first impressions to Elestrals Clash. At this point, I think only about a handful of individuals have actually experienced it. A bunch of people in the Kickstarter, including myself, the Knots, and Wirtz. And I want to talk pretty specifically about what I like, what I don't like, and about what I think there is room for improvement upon. Let's begin with the elephant in the room. It only sort of works. Elestrals has unfortunately made a critical error when releasing the alpha build of their game. It's actually in alpha. The thing's buggy pretty much everywhere. There's a bunch of functionality that just hasn't been coded in yet. There's missing assets. There's whole segments of the client that don't yet have anything in them. And of the entire hundreds deep card pool, there's only about 40 total things you can be putting in a deck. I was mad about this for like 30 seconds before I realized that my understanding of video games has just been completely warped by the way dev cycles work now. These days, if you put an alpha build on Steam, that's expected to be a full, complete, working game. Like these days, an alpha build is just a day one build, but you want to have 3 cycles of hype instead of 1. Oh, the game designed from the ground up for streamers to make pog faces at is now entering beta. You should care about it for a week. This is how you get games that are dead before full release, and I do appreciate that this is a very traditional alpha. A lot of shit's just broke, and a lot of the point of releasing it in this state is to get a bunch of tests done on a bunch of people's computers that are way different than the one that you are testing on in your native environment. So to that end, keep in mind that everything I'm complaining about is on a piece of software that just is not yet complete. All right, let's talk about it. So first and foremost, right now, there's about 20 cards. Admittedly, they are kind of the cards you would want to be in the game if you were starting it from day zero. Astrabbit, Elachik, Jolton. Hell, you can pretty much build Earth Thunder Nexus if you're willing to forego Viserys at this moment in-game. Notably absent, however, are a significant amount of the back row runes that kind of make the game what it is at present. There's no PTA, there's no Gorgon's Gaze. There is a shield and there is a tsunami, but that's really only half you would expect to run into. Additionally, games can be really snowbally because there's no ambrosia, so you kind of have to be in thunder and water to be playing like Quackle and Sluggle to do a decent approximation of them. That sucks. As mentioned, there are a ton of bugs. Just from what I encountered, there's this big red box that shows up when you attack an opponent's like Spire. Sometimes cards just don't work, like you're not able to switch them to attack or defense position or use their activated abilities. Happens a lot more if you put them in the leftmost 2 monster zones, so try to avoid those if you're in the alpha. There's this thing where like if Equilinx checks to see if it is getting attack from a Feloy forest, Feloy will trigger on every in-game action taken, putting him up to like a 1000 attack guy. And at present, Kindleo can activate its Nexus effect and then Nexus 0 and then pop a card. It's just like exiled force that doesn't die every single turn. Again, this is all stuff that I expect to be patched out, but at present, that's what I was running into. Let's talk a little bit about the UI. I don't love the UI. I talked about this a little bit on stream, but it kind of currently reminds me of a Windows XP theme. Like you would download like the World of Warcraft Windows XP theme and it would make your start button look like a drop-down menu. It's a lot of the same like flat gradient as a scroll bar type stuff that you would expect from that era of design. Buttons are like perfectly rectangular and have the same unmoving gradient on them. And whatever this thing is, it's gotta stop. The biggest issue I have with the UI is the big blue button in the corner. So at present, there's not like a timer specifically. I imagine there will be in the future. The functionality is available in like custom games, I think. But you've got this like chess clock style button that you have to click to pass priority. It turns into a big blue circle and says pass. And you do that all the time, like passing priority and draw, and then standby, and then main, and then each individual step of battle, attack deck, battle step, end of battle, which is not intuitive or communicated anywhere. It gets you into these gross situations where like you accidentally end battle a little early, or you accidentally enter battle way earlier than you want, or your opponent waits on you for like 5 minutes while you try to figure out who has priority. To me, this sort of of thing is the most important thing to resolve when modifying the UI. Elestrals is so much more intuitive than almost any other card game I've ever played. It's shocking how unintuitive the system actually is in this specific instance. The button sucks for another reason too, and that's that like the font on it looks bad. The fonts everywhere look kind of cheap. They look sort of like something you would find in a Google pack, and they don't always fit the button for which they are sitting on top of. So I hope that that gets fixed. And finally, this screen can't exist. It's got to be replaced Master Duel style with maybe a little hexagon of an opponent going, and there's a couple cards shuffling in the background. It can't go dark. At present, it's really hard to figure out what your card actually does. Like, if you activate an effect, a tiny little circle with the guy's face shows up in the middle of the board, and then like if you want to hover your guy, you can hover it, and it gets a little thing over there, but it's too small to really read, so you click it, and it brings up a big version, but not before hovering a small version a little closer to your eye line. The big version also includes like a bunch of stat changes in a box that's usually empty to the left. It's a mess. The deck build screen, not good either. I don't know what's going on with the individual cards. Like, there's all these extra particles on them that don't move, so they look kind of cheap, but also don't look good. When you put them in the thing, there's almost no way of telling what card you've put where. Like, I thought Hearthstone style, it would have like their name on it, but instead it's just like a cross section of their picture taken at random. And finally, when you change your name, it says it has to be 4 characters, but because it's in the alpha stage, it puts a pixel-born prefix at the beginning, which will be caster, which puts it to like 15 characters, which means I wasn't able to be caster MBT. I had to be caster MBT Elestrals. That's the most important thing you need to fix before moving out of alpha. Okay, so that's me shit talking the client for 3 minutes. Let's talk about the stuff I did like. It works. Like, there's bugs everywhere, and frequently cards don't do what you want, but at the end of the day, it is Elestrals on a web client. It's a damn sight better than the application, and you are able to play full games against thinking opponents on this client. To me, that is a huge win. In fact, a significant amount of the cards that I thought would be really difficult to implement, cards that Nexus like Equilinx or Kindleo, and cards that pseudo foretell like Astrabbit, are already in the game. By putting those cards in the game, powerful base set staples, you already have a sort of approximation of how a metagame will develop as a result of this existing. They're very upfront about how unfinished the product is. I was really scared it was going to be like, we're going to release this, and then based on negative perception, we're going to take it down, and then we'll just like can it, you know? But no, they look pretty committed to actually finishing it. I like the little mates. I hope we'll be able to select them in the future. Right now, they don't do anything if you click on them like Master Duel, but I'm sure that's the #1 thing they're adding. Hovering your little spire gives you a quick once-over to see what spirits you still have in your spirit deck, and it looks really tight. In fact, enchanting spirits and moving spirits from one guy to another is intuitive and works really well. There's this cool particle effect when you perform a Nexus that could be a little clearer and more intuitive, but largely is on the right track. Cards don't really have a weight to them at present. You always feel like you're doing the same amount of damage to an opponent no matter how hard you're hitting them, and when they're destroyed, they just sort of disappear into the nether zone, but they do work. They get put on the board, you get to choose if they're in attack and defense, etc. Speaking of attack and defense, I really like this little thing they've done, where like if they're in defense, they're a little longer, and if they're in attack, they're up and down. That's cool. So ultimately, where I land on this is a little optimistic. I thought it was ridiculous to think that they would have like a Master Duel style product built in a month, obviously, and they don't. It is nowhere near that slick yet. But the bones of something really great are there. It's going to take, in my opinion, a little longer than they have in terms of a dev timeline to flesh it out, but that doesn't mean it's something we're never going to get. Moving forward, I hope they capitalize on the fact that Elestrals is super intuitive and use that to influence the UI instead of just doing this thing where you're like, yeah, you have to pass on battle and pass on damage, and we're never telling you what step you're in, etc., etc. And I hope they get a designer to just sort of web 3.0 all of the existing buttons and scrolls. You don't really want to spend too much money on design before the product is fucking finished yet. I understand that. I want to conclude with this. I know a lot of people were asking if we're going to move the Poison Nectar Monthly to Elestrals Clash, and I will just say we aren't going to do that until it resembles something like the paper product. That's going to be a far way off, but until then, I will probably be streaming this a little bit, at least on twitch.tv and on YouTube streams, with a disclaimer that this is alpha footage and it resembles such. So, cautiously optimistic about the future of Elestrals Clash, a little taken aback by the fact that an alpha actually resembles an alpha these days, and confronted with some problems that I think everyone on the team knows is extremely obvious. Tomorrow, I'll be letting all of you that did get into the alpha know what deck you could build to most effectively exploit the bugs. Bye-bye.